Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish, a podcast dedicated to transforming disabilities into special abilities. I'm your host, Brady Murray. Welcome to our podcast today. I'm thrilled to welcome my special guest and friend, Sarah Stites, joining us from Armenia. Can you believe that Sarah is in Armenia? Sarah serves as an excitement officer at the Emili Aregak Foundation. She played a significant role in making our trip to Armenia in October not only possible, but also a great success. Sarah is dedicated to changing the status quo surrounding the topic of people with disabilities. Sarah, so good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor for me, Brady.
Yes, the honor is mine. This is a long time coming, this podcast. We've been wanting to do this for probably a good 6 months. And honestly, I feel like the timing couldn't be better right now, having experienced what we experienced this last year in Armenia and then working hard to hopefully be able to replicate and grow upon the work that we've been done this year. So this will be fun. So Sarah, this is going to be a really fun podcast for me and for our listeners because you have such a unique story. Would you be open to sharing with us? Just start from the beginning about your story and how in the world did you end up moving and ultimately living in?
Thank you for the question. I love this question. I think it really points to God's providence and how we often can never even imagine the path we're going to be taken down. So let's fast forward to when I was a teenager. I have always been interested in my Armenian heritage. I'm 25% Armenian, so I have one grandfather who was Armenian, but I never got to meet him. Unfortunately, he passed away when my mom was 16 years old. And so that side of my heritage, the Armenianness in my family really died when my grandfather died. And so it was a strange turn of events that brought me to an event in downtown DC in 2016, almost a decade ago. It's crazy to think about that. I had graduated from college. I was working in journalism, and I had a colleague who was also part Armenian. And she said, Sarah, let's go downtown. There's an event for Armenians in DC. And I said, okay, well, if you're going to go, I'll go. And at the last minute, she got sick. And I was faced with this choice to go to this event where I knew no one or to not go. And it was cold, it was snowy, it was December. I had to do a 45-minute metro ride into the city. And I was so tempted to say, not this time. But I felt something in me, which I'm positive was the Holy Spirit pushing, go. You need to go to this event. A bit begrudgingly, I went. And I remember entering the doorway of this building where the event was being held. And I saw all of these people who look much more phenotypically Armenian than I do. Some of them were speaking Armenian. I thought, what have I got myself into? Lovely guy came up to me and introduced himself. And honestly, Brady, I think you know this now after having experienced Armenia a few times. Armenians are so friendly. And that was my first taste of Armenian hospitality. That man who is still a good friend, and he's a donor actually now of our work here. He introduced himself and he started introducing me to others in the room. And at that very event, I learned about a program called Birthright Armenia, which is intended for young people like myself who are only partly Armenian maybe, or who, let's say, have grown up in another country outside of Armenia, but have Armenian roots, to come back to Armenia and explore their heritage, learn the language, live with a host family, and ideally fall so in love with the country that they want to repatriate. And that's exactly what happened for me. I had the great blessing of being placed as a volunteer at Emili Aregak Center here in Gyumri, where I am now. I'm sitting on the campus right now. This is a center for children with special needs, and we'll get into that more, of course, over the course of our conversation. But it was the right timing and it was the right place, and my heart just fell for Armenia. And almost 7 years later, I'm still here.
Wow. Okay, so you grew up on the East Coast, born American, went to school in the United States. I mean, everything about you was American. And so I actually want to explore more this. Just, you go to this dinner, this event, and you just feel called to visit Armenia. But I don't think at that time you thought, I'm going to Armenia to live. Like, it was more of just, I want to go visit my heritage in essence, right?
Exactly.
So tell me more about that trip and what transpired in that trip that caused you to go from you were graduated from college, correct? You had a
Mm.
career, you had
Mm.
work, all of your family's in the United States. So how did you go from leaving your life behind, or maybe just going on a trip for a while, to completely leaving your life behind and committing yourself to this work in Armenia?
That's a great question. I think what really happened to me in that moment was there was two things. One is that when I was 19 years old, I had the opportunity to study abroad in Northern Ireland. And I'm mostly Irish by blood. So I'm Irish, Armenian, and there's a little bit of French and Scottish in there. But I spent my whole junior year of college in Northern Ireland, and that really opened my eyes to the beauty of exploring a new place, and not only as a tourist, but as someone who puts down her roots for a while and really gets to know the people and the culture. And so that was a very special experience for me. And I think when I came back to DC and I graduated and I started working, there was something about the, you know, 8 to 5 grind of DC life, waking up early, going into the office, getting home late, and thinking at the end of the day, did I really do anything to change the status quo? Did I do anything to really help anyone or make change in my community? And, to be honest, Brady, when I was younger, I never really thought that that would matter so much to me once I entered the workforce. But after a year and a half in the workforce, I thought, I am not satisfied by this. There has to be something more to life than this. And so at that party, when I was told I could go to Armenia for up to a year, through this program, I thought, you know what? If nothing else, it's going to be an opportunity to have another Northern Ireland experience
Mm-hmm.
and connect with a side of me that I hadn't yet explored, understand a new culture and a new people. And, if nothing else, have an adventure. Maybe it was going to be my last chance. I kind of had that mentality. I'm in my early 20s. I'm going to have to kind of settle down after this. But yeah, as you said, it was supposed to be only a year, just a short-term thing. But that's the headspace I was in. Not satisfied, looking for something more, but not at all aware of what was around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's perfect. That's super helpful. So you moved to Armenia. You're there for a year is what the plan was. So that's a commitment. I mean, that's a big commitment. That makes sense with your experience having gone to Ireland. So prior to this, had you had any exposure or had done any work in the disability community or special needs community?
Yes, I had. And I'll say two things. The way that the program worked, Birthright Armenia, is that I was presented with options of where to serve. And one of the reasons that this therapy center caught my eye was because I grew up attending a church in the DC area called McLean Bible Church. And our pastor's daughter had severe disabilities. And it was always
Okay.
his dream to support other families in the DC metro area who were facing the same challenge of not necessarily having support and respite. Um, and so he and his wife, they founded a place called Jill's House, which was on the campus of our church, named after their daughter Jill. And it is one of the premier centers in the East Coast, actually, that serves families. It's almost like a summer camp squeezed into 2 to 3 days, where a family for a subsidized fee, very small, very affordable fee, donors subsidize it, of course. They're able to bring their child up to age 18. The child has an amazing experience for those 48 or 72 hours, and the family has some time to recoup. This is so important for the strength of the family, right? That marriages remain intact, that the other children in the family get some extra time with their parents, because as you well know, it's just a natural piece of having a child with a disability that often the focus is on that child. And it can, in many cases, when there's not sufficient support and respite, cause family breakdown, especially
Right.
sometimes when faith is not present, right? To
Most
hold
definitely.
the family
Yeah, most
together.
definitely. So you had that background and that experience. And so
Mm-hmm.
you specifically sought out a disability opportunity in Armenia when you went there.
I did. And the thing that attracted me the most was that this center specifically was looking for volunteers to help them with a project, a very innovative project that they were in the middle of launching. They had gotten funding for it, but it was not yet open. They hadn't completed the construction yet, but they had pitched to the European Union, actually, a project to open Armenia's, not only Armenia's, the whole Caucasus region's first cafe to employ people with special needs and family members of these young adults. So think mothers of children with cerebral palsy, young adults with Down syndrome, a totally innovative concept for this part of the world.
Most definitely.
Right? And I thought, oh my gosh, this is happening, and I might have a chance to, shape how this goes forward. And that was honestly the most attractive piece for me, because my background is in marketing. So I come, from a professional perspective from the business field. So I was really intrigued by how business could be used to change stereotypes and the status quo.
Yeah. So Sarah, how was that first year? Tell us about this project. Tell us about what your experience was and what that led to.
My gosh, there's so many things to share. I'll try and condense it into a few key points, my learnings. The biggest learning that I experienced and that I still wrestle with is the reality of how I grew up, the privileges that I had growing up in the Washington, D.C. area, and the reality of what children experience in our city here of Gyumri, whether or not they have disabilities or not. The reality is that life in Gyumri is a lot harder. The economy is not very strong. About 35 years ago, the city experienced a massive earthquake that decimated the population, really plunged the economy. A lot of factories were ruined. Then Armenia, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Armenia was left floundering. There were a lot of issues that happened in the late 80s and early 90s, and Gyumri has been struggling over the decades to get back on its feet. So I came and I saw things like, poor roads and poor infrastructure and educational system that was in no way inclusive of children with special needs. Families, let's say, of a child with cerebral palsy that live in a fourth floor apartment building and there's no elevator and they have to carry the child up and down the stairs. Minimum wages that would blow your mind, all of these things. And I thought, this is what it means to look at the way that you've been raised and those privileges you've had and use them to help other people. That we are given privileges and blessings so that we can bless others. And that hit me full force that first year. I've been given my education, my family, the peaceful upbringing I had to bring some respite and hope to people who have not had those privileges and those blessings. So that's something I still wrestle with almost 7 years later. But on the more positive side, I was struck by the potential of Gyumri and the reality that I come from a highly developed city where, as a young person, it can be actually a challenge to make your mark. And in Gyumri, I thought, my gosh, there are so many things to do. There are so many possibilities. There's so much that needs changing. And I also have so much to learn. This is a place where I'm going to grow immensely as a human. I'm going to be challenged by the culture shock, by the language. I'm going to be challenged to look at life in a different way. For example, to prioritize people over productivity in some cases, right? And as Americans, sometimes that can be, I think, challenging for us. We're so sometimes laser focused on being efficient and productive. And here, I discovered, wow, this community prioritizes people in every decision, and that's such a beautiful thing. So those are a couple of my learnings, and I'm still learning so much. But my brain, Brady, I can tell you, my brain at the end of every day was so tired because I was also learning the language and trying to figure out this culture, which is so different, right? It's a collective culture. It's a more Eastern culture. And I had to come to grips with a lot of stereotypes I myself held. So it was challenging and formative.
So we, Andrea and I, when we went to Armenia the first time in 2023, and we had Bonnie with us, and we had our videographer for Rod's Heroes with us as well. And we actually extended our trip. we were planning on leaving a certain day, and we stayed a couple extra days so we could go to Umri because we heard about this all-inclusive cafe and we wanted to go there. And so I've spent time there. We've stayed there this year. And so I've seen the community, and it is very different from what we have here in the United States. And everything that you have described, I've experienced it very small compared to what you have experienced, but I still, in my mind, am like processing how Sarah, with all of this very unique and great upbringing and all, the world is her oyster and this great job in DC, etc., chooses to move to in a way within where you're at in a developing country still. I mean, Armenia is amazing, but definitely different in many, many ways. You didn't speak the language. Like, some people speak English there, but not really. The vast majority of individuals do not speak English, and you're alone, right? You're there alone. And so walk me through that, Sarah. This is a testament to you, because to you, it was just it's what you did, and you embraced it and you loved it. But I think to the vast majority of our audience, there's still a trying to have an understanding of how you got to, I am leaving everything behind and I am moving to Armenia and I'm going to consecrate my life to this work. And so share with us what that process looked like for you.
At the end of the day, because I've spent a lot of time reflecting on this too, Brady, it's interesting. Sometimes you find yourself walking down this path and then you have this moment and you think, why am I on this path? You need to kind of recenter with yourself, right? And figure out, is this the path I'm supposed to be on? Why am I here? And make sure you're in alignment with yourself. And I think there comes a point where everyone realizes that their culture, their family, their community, their faith, whatever the case may be, you tend to be handed by these structures a script of how life should look. And I'm not really talking about, moral structures. I'm talking about kind of you go to school, you get married, you have kids, you find a good job, you have the nice house, this sort of ideal looking life that many of us aspire to. And sometimes we're contented by that. And other times we realize maybe that's not exactly what we were looking for, or that our path to that contentment looks different. And there are times when I will open LinkedIn and see, a college classmate's achievements in some fancy business stateside and get slightly envious and think, maybe I should have pursued that sort of life. Or, I open Facebook and see that a friend has had her third baby, and her life looks different. But at the end of the day, I'm just satisfied by what I do. Almost every day, there is some sort of tangible impact I see. Be it, we've renovated a bathroom to make it more, accessible for a child with a disability, and that changes the everyday hygiene routine of the family. Or, a child at our center has learned to walk or to speak for the first time, and eventually that child's going to run, and without our center's intervention, she would have remained in a wheelchair. All of these things are so huge. And I'll clinch my scattered thoughts by saying, in those moments where I sometimes question, did I make the right decision or did I not? I think back to something beautiful that happened in 2019, the very year when I decided, okay, I'm going to live in Armenia permanently. This was after my volunteering. I'd gone back to the States for a few months and I prayed about it and I decided I'm going to go back to Armenia. I'm going to live there full time. So this was October 2019. And I was speaking with my mom and she said, Sarah, it's so interesting that you're following in your grandpa's footsteps. And I know that he and I were similar in certain ways, but I wasn't exactly sure what she meant. And I said, how do you mean? And she thought she had told me this, but I have no memory of it. Apparently, my grandfather in the 1950s, he worked under President Eisenhower on a campaign called Hire the Handicapped. And this campaign was started after World War II. It was intended to use, creative means of communication at the time, avant-garde, radio, TV, to interview men who had been wounded and disabled in the war and talk through on screen or, over radio, the skills that they had and work to shift this mindset that they were useless once they had lost a leg or, were in a wheelchair, XYZ. And I was just totally floored when my mom told me that. And I started to investigate his story, and I found articles he wrote and old newspaper clippings. And this was a passion area for him, to show that all people had dignity in the eyes of God, no matter their status as abled or disabled. And I ended up writing an article about my discovery about him and this sort of strange alignment of our paths. There's a saying in Armenian, which means you can't escape your destiny. And of course, I think it's providence, right? That aligns people's paths like this. But I titled my article and I published it in the Armenian Weekly. And I remember a few years later, I got a random email from a woman in Arkansas where my grandfather was working on this campaign. And she said, I'm from I think it's the Historical Preservation Division of the state government. And she said, we're nominating your grandfather's home as a sort of, protected site where people can come and visit because of his work with people with disabilities. And the reason that she reached out to me, she would never have found me. We have different last names. I don't think the path between us was clear. She found me because I wrote that article, and she had Googled his name, and that came up, and she was able to connect with me that way. And it was just, I say all of this because I believe firmly that nothing is a coincidence. And I think back to that beautiful alignment of our stories and our paths, and I know that God is in this. And that gives me great comfort in those moments that are hard and challenging, because there are many moments like that.
What a beautiful, beautiful story and imagery just that I have of your grandfather and the work that he's doing. And without question, in my heart, I would say that he has very much been involved in you and your efforts that you're doing there. And even in a very special way, I feel is very involved with Rod's Heroes and the work that we're doing together with Aregak and you and your team over there. And so it's quite remarkable to be able to see that. My daughter this week was telling me she finished her semester up at Utah State. She's in the Huntsman School of Business, and there's a saying they use of standing on the shoulders of giants. And I feel like you are standing on the shoulders of your grandfather in being able to continue the work, the foundation, in essence, that he has created. And that it's fun to be able to consider Rod's Heroes and the small part that we're playing in that as well. And thank you for being so vulnerable and so open in regards to your feelings when you see a classmate that maybe has this promotion or a friend that is expanding and growing their family, because that is a conscious decision and path that you've chosen, Sarah, to be able to, in essence, limit your focus on that particular aspect of what the normal society would term, right? The normal side of things, we would coin that, to be able to pursue a path very much less traveled and very much of a different way. But I can say for myself, I have seen and I have witnessed what your decision, your selfless decision, has done for so many people in Emili. And I've seen that. And I've gone to the cafe and I've spent time there, and I've seen the people that work there and the amazing, amazing individuals that they are. And I can just see Sarah's influence all over in that city and in that center. And what a selfless sacrifice that is truly having a ripple effect into generations. Really, for you, some seen, but most likely much of this work that you're doing is going to be unseen. And you may not know about this until a much later time when that ripple effect just continues. So that's quite remarkable just to consider.
Thank you, Brady.
So when we went over there, a very integral part of in the work that you did was you created a pathway for us to be able to enter into an orphanage where there were many children, hundreds, well, over 150-ish children who have disabilities, and many of which have very severe disabilities. There's 34 children in that particular orphanage that has Down syndrome. And we are seeing many, many families. I think the number now is 18 families that have answered the call to adopt a child with Down syndrome
Wow.
from Armenia. And so that's a perfect example of ripple effect of the work that you have done there. But share with us what that experience was like for you that day that we went to that orphanage and was able to spend the day there in service and in bringing joy to these kids. What was that like for you, Sarah?
Oh my gosh, Brady, it was a very heavy experience. I've been to my fair share of orphanages for children with special needs in Armenia. There are several. There's one I visit quite frequently in Spitak, which is not so far from Gyumri. It's run by the Sisters of Charity. I believe that's their name, the Order of Mother Teresa. So I've had a lot of experiences, but I think that particular experience with Rod's Heroes, going there, entering, I just realized in a new way why we have families and why God has structured families in the way that he has. There's a father and a mother and their children, because in that orphanage, as hard as they were trying to love on those children and to care for all of them, there is no replacement for a mom and a dad. And I think that's what hit me the most. And again, like I said before, thinking back to my upbringing and thinking about the privilege of having a mother and a father. There are times when we're kids or teenagers where we roll our eyes at our parents and we think, oh, my parents, my parents. And then you get older and you think, oh my gosh, I was raised in a loving home. And my parents sacrificed everything for me and gave me the love I needed to go out on my own and make a life for myself. And so I've always loved the concept of adoption, and I think it really reflects our faith too, that we're adopted as sons and daughters of God when we answer the call to Christianity. But that experience was new for me. I think I just felt it in a different way. And I have to say, there was also this feeling in me that I wanted to push down, but I have to say it because it's an honest feeling. And I'm going to be vulnerable now and say it, that I can understand why certain families give up their children when they don't have the support network, when they have people in their families, which unfortunately is a common reality in Armenia, especially in more rural parts of our country.
That's right.
Where relatives are going to say, this child is damaged, this child is imperfect, this child is going to bring shame on the house. Or even worse, they blame the mother frequently, that it was something wrong with the mother, that the child had a disability. And so there's that weight and the reality that, maybe they don't have the financial resources to care for the child. They're afraid of what the community is going to say or do. And so it's something that I cannot blame them for. I don't think it's right, but simultaneously, I'm not going to blame. And so that brings me all back to saying, I understood the importance of our work at Emili Aregak Center, our therapy center, so much in that moment. Wow, we are that support network for families. And there are families who have not given up their kids or aborted their children because they knew
That's right.
that there was a support center like ours that would walk alongside those families. So it was an intense experience, but also such a beautiful experience, such sweet, sweet children. And it broke, I think, all of our hearts that we bonded with those children in that moment and then we had to leave.
Yeah.
Right.
No
I
doubt.
think we all were horrifically affected by that
No
moment.
doubt. You have such incredible insight, Sarah, and it comes from lived experience. I think for many of us in the United States, it's difficult to be able to understand how a family could possibly even come to grips of having this child receiving a diagnosis and then ultimately taking that child and leaving that child in an orphanage or an institute only to be able to be there alone without a family for the remainder of their life. Like that just seems so foreign and impossible to be able to process. But you are right. You are right. if placed in the exact same circumstances, in the exact same country or situation, most of these families who would otherwise judge otherwise, right, would do exactly the exact same thing. And you are absolutely right that the center in Gyumri is making it possible for families to be able to keep their children and have courage to be able to raise that child and know and have confidence that the resources will be there to help them to be able to allow that child to be able to sing the song that they're meant to sing. So I actually want to touch on that a bit, because you have seen firsthand many examples of children who have been raised by their family in Armenia that have Down syndrome, that have other disabilities, that truly are singing the song they're meant to sing. Is there any examples that you wanted to share of a child or an individual doing that as a result of their family keeping them?
Oh my goodness, yes. There are three examples that come to mind. One is Catherine. She's a teenager now. She has cerebral palsy and she's whip smart. She's so smart. She speaks amazing Russian. Armenian is her native tongue. She wants to be Armenia's first female prime minister, and she's also toying with the idea of being a psychologist. And this was a shift. Originally, she had political aspirations, and then she switched to the psychology aspiration. And I remember talking to her and asking, why did that switch? And she had gotten to the point, the kind of cognizant moment of teenagerhood, where she realized that her parents could have given her up and didn't, and that they have a lot of challenges associated with her disability, but they've always been there for her. Her mom quit her nursing career to be by Catherine's side, and the school in Gyumri where Catherine goes does not have accessible toilets. And so Louisa, her mom, needs to be available to help Catherine during the day to just use the restroom. So Catherine was so aware of this reality because she's very smart and she thought it all through. And she wants to be a psychologist to counsel the parents of children with special needs to say, no, you can do this. I saw my own parents do it. Getting goosebumps as I say it,
Okay.
And I got to attend a center where, people will walk alongside you and these resources exist. So she's one person that comes to my mind. And I'm convinced, she's a great example of someone who maybe people would look at and say, oh, she's not able, but she is so able. And she has a heart and a brain that is going to go places. I'm also thinking of Haik, who has autism and doesn't speak. He can say words here or there. He has pretty severe behavioral issues. And when he was younger, he was a handful, to be honest. And his mom never imagined that he would become a musician who's performed in front of the prime minister's wife at, big musical events here in Armenia. But Haik really, for me, challenged my concept of what disability means, because sure, in some senses, right, when it comes to his verbal communication, his social communication, maybe he's not as able as I am. But I have no musical talent whatsoever. And Haik can play the xylophone. He loves classical music, Bach, Beethoven. He has a penchant for those sorts of songs particularly, and he will not play rubbish songs. He loves his classical music. And I love just watching him when he's in a room performing. He's not even looking at the xylophone. And he's performing perfectly and just looking around while he's doing it. And I'm thinking, how does he do that? How? It's like, what ability? He has such ability.
Superpowers,
And then the third example I'll share is Hovannes, who you've met.
Yes.
He is beloved by all in Gyumri, and he's become such an icon of Gyumri. He has Down syndrome, and he is one of the waiters at Aregak Bakery, our cafe. And I think the biggest lesson that Hovo has taught me is that not only do people with special needs, with disabilities, have the ability to learn and to be employed, but they can also shine in particular fields, right? Just like you, Brady, are specifically gifted in certain areas. I'm specifically gifted in certain areas. Hovo is specifically gifted.
That's right.
As a waiter, right? He just does that job really well. Better, again, I could say, than other people who are classically abled. He lights up the room. Everyone is so excited when he serves them. And, the kids in his neighborhood made fun of him when he was little. And if it were not for my colleague Marine, who happened to live next door to him in the apartment building, he might never have made it to our center. And he passed through this program, 9 Steps to the Labor Market, that we offer to help young adults enter society and the workforce and learn about their strengths and weaknesses, how to write a resume, how to interact in a team. He passed through there, and he was one of our very first employees at the bakery. And now his face is so iconic, and he is part of the brand of our bakery. And it just goes to show, and I'd love to talk about this more if you're down, Brady, how business is a huge tool in change making. This is a passion area of mine. If we have time, we should get back to that.
Please go on. I'd love to talk.
Yeah. Okay. So I love this concept of business because people will go to a business that offers high quality products and good service, right? It doesn't really matter so much what the mission is, right? People support businesses that give them what they're looking for, right? What they're going to get in return for their money, right? It's a transaction at the end of the day. And through watching Aregak Bakery, I realized that a lot of social businesses, right? Businesses that are started with the intention of, accomplishing a social mission, they often focus too heavily on the social side and not enough on the business side.
That's right.
And I really don't think that's sustainable in the long run. And what I think Aregak Bakery does so well, and that is absolutely due to our director Tigranui and our manager Diana, they do an amazing job, is that the service is strong, but the products are exceptional.
I can vouch for that.
They're so good. The coffee is pretty well recognized in the city as the best coffee, and you don't go anywhere else for pastries in the city. And so at the end of the day, you're going to have people who come in simply because they've heard that the croissants are amazing and the flat white is to die for. They sit down and then they're served by Jovanes or one of our other staff, and something clicks in their brain, right? We're not saying people with Down syndrome are equal. We're not putting up billboards, which have their place. But when they see ability in action, they have to change their mindset.
That's right.
Because Hovo objectively has done a good job.
That's right.
It's serving
a superpower.
Them, right?
Yeah, it's a superpower. Exactly. There was actually a post that we did. It was kind of by happen chance when we were over there, when we had our Rods Heroes team, and we had Sofia Sanchez and Jennifer was there, her mom, and everybody's just kind of hanging out there, and they ordered what they ordered, and then Hovo brought their food and their drinks and presented it with an amazing way that he does. And they tested it, and it was so tasty and so good. And that post went viral. I mean, it has millions and millions of views. And that is exactly a testament of what you just said. And so it is amazing service. It is amazing food. And the fact that Hovo is like arguably the best in Gyumri, the best in Armenia at being able to serve that with a smile and kindness and joy and just that superpower of being accepting of all, that's what makes that so special. And so nobody goes there out of a charity case. People go there because of the amazing experience that they have.
That is so, so well said. And if I can incorporate one more piece of marketing lingo here, the unique selling proposition, right? What makes Aregak different? At the end of the day, the business itself is strong. People come back, yes, because they enjoy the products. There are also other good products in Gyumri. So why do they come to Aregak? Because of that joy, right? And that light. If the video didn't have Jovanes and Sophia in it, right? That video that our friend Misty captured that went viral, it wouldn't have gone viral.
That's right.
Why do people share it? Because of the sheer joy on Sophia's face at seeing that the waiter looked like her.
Yeah.
right? And Hovo's kindness in bringing her this gluten-free pastry that she wanted and then hugging her, right?
Yeah.
Signing the book. I remember all of these beautiful photos, and it's that's what makes Aregak unique at the end of the day. And I always have to remind myself of that. That's why, when we're doing posts on Facebook or Instagram, sure, maybe one day we'll highlight a really beautiful croissant, but that's really not the content that people like. They want to see the people. Our slogan is share our joy, because it's about the joy and the light that people
That's
feel
right.
when they come.
That's right. And that joy is reaching the world. It's reaching the world by the millions as a result of that. And I want to trace that all the way back to what you had just said. In fact, what I had just learned. Nui, who is a leader at Aregak at the Center for Individuals with Disabilities in Gyumri, was a neighbor, shared an apartment complex with Hovo's family. And that is how she was ultimately connected in this way. And what that opened up was the door for Hovo to sing the song that he is meant to sing. Here we are many, many years later talking about that. Is that fair?
That's close, but it was not Tigranui, it was Marine. So Marine
Okay,
is,
Marine, there you
yeah,
go.
but anyway, but the same concept is there. Marine is the one who works with our young adults. So she heads up the 9 Steps program, and
Yep.
she saw the potential in Hovo. And it
Hovo.
was her
That's
courage,
perfect.
right? To go up to her neighbor and say, I think that your son has potential and I'd love for him to come and join our group. And thanks to Marine's, she didn't have to do that, right? I mean, it's kind of outside of work hours, but of course she loves what she does and she sees potential in everyone, and it was thanks to her.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. It is full circle, and the mission of Rod's Heroes is to uncover the superpowers of individuals with Down syndrome. One of the ways we do that is through helping kids get adopted. There's other ways that we do that as well. I look at what Aregak at the bakery is doing, and that's truly allowing these individuals to sing the song they're meant to sing. I see what the center is doing, and that's empowering families to take that courageous decision upon receiving diagnosis to keep their child or to not abort their child, to be able to raise that child in Gyumri in their family, knowing that they have a center and a support for them to be able to go through their formative years and then amazing access and direction in those years to come. There's still so much work to be able to do. And again, I've been to the center multiple times, the bakery multiple times. I would love to give our audience the opportunity to be able to learn how they may get involved with the center, with the bakery, whether that's through volunteering or going and visiting or possibly donating. Can you share with us how our audience may be able to get in touch with you and with the center?
Absolutely. So the best way to learn more about our work is to visit our website, which is caritasardegak.org, and I presume that will be
We'll put
linked.
it in the show notes. Yep.
And then our social media pages always have a lot of great content. That's Emili_Aregak and Aregak Bakery. So just for kind of joyful updates throughout the week, that's a great place to go. We'll also post links to fundraisers that we're doing now and then on those pages. So that's a good place to watch if you're interested in donating. We also have a donation button on our website. But one particular way that I am passionate about inviting people to get involved financially, should they wish to do so, is to sponsor a child. So we do have a special link on our website that allows people to sponsor. And what that looks like is basically subsidizing a month of services for a child. So generally the children who come to our center are going to take advantage of our accessible transport service, meals, and the different suite of therapies that they need when they do their assessment. So it could look like for one child, speech therapy twice a week. It could look like for another child, physical therapy, psychological counseling, and art therapy 3 times a week. So every plan is individual, but we kind of just average out a number, and that just helps us offset the charges because it's totally free of charge for families. We do, and I actually really like this, we do ask families to contribute about $2.50 USD per month as a sort of a sign that they're vested, because if it's totally free, we have noticed that sometimes if it's not convenient for a family to bring the child, they might back out. And that's not good. We want them to feel that they have something invested so that they make every appointment, and we're not wasting our therapist's time. But otherwise expensive services are free of charge to the families. So, and then
I've seen it
volunteering.
firsthand. Yeah, I've seen
you
it
have,
and witnessed
right?
it firsthand. The volunteers, I've seen the families very, very engaged. The center is beautiful. The professionals are first class and are doing an amazing job. And so I highly encourage our listeners to consider donating to this. This is something that this center is fulfilling the mission of what Rod's Heroes has been aspiring to do for many, many years in inspiring families to ultimately be able to keep their children. And you guys are doing that. And so that, there's only the adoption piece of it is what we say is like third best. I would say second best would be adopted by an Armenian. Third best would be adopted by somebody outside of Armenia. But first best would be that family gets to choose to keep that child. And has the resources to do that. So I think that's super important. I'm going to close with an experience that I had at that orphanage that particular day. In fact, it started the day before. There was a beautiful little girl. She's probably 3 or 4, has Down syndrome, who goes to the center. And she had a show to put on for the talent show. And this girl has so much personality and so much sass and so much is just amazing. And she is a dancer of all dancers, like just so cute. Like, her mom is awesome and has trained her well in her dancing and just drawing an amazing smile from the crowd. So we experienced that on, I think that was Monday. And then Tuesday, we spent the day in the orphanage. And this mom and her daughter, who she has raised, obviously, since birth, were there with us. And I was there with other girls that were the exact same age, 3, 4 years old, that are beautiful and have the exact same level of potential as this amazing little girl, but yet are in this orphanage. And you can see the stark difference in the light in their eyes and the hope that they have between the child that has her mother there and the children that don't. Now, the great news is we're finding families for these children, these girls. I'm confident that we will have families for these girls. But how much better would it have been if their mothers, their birth mothers, were able to raise them just like this other little girl is being raised by her birth mother? And that's the work that you're doing. That's ultimately the work that you guys are doing, is empowering families to be able to raise their children and have the support that they have. So such an amazing work. And Sarah, you're an inspiration to all of us, myself included. I commend you for your courage in answering the call and holding true and being faithful to that feeling in your heart to be able to go forward with this work. And you've no doubt sacrificed so much, but I believe in compensatory blessings. And I believe that your efforts and your sacrifice will be made whole, and that you will experience and are experiencing things that many who don't answer that particular call in their heart will never experience. And so congratulations on being so amazing. We're so thankful for our relationship with you, and stay tuned to our audience. We have lots of good things coming in the works this year with our continued work in Armenia. If all goes well, we hope to be able to be back in Armenia this fall and be able to spend time with Sarah and our dear friends over there. So Sarah, thanks for being a guest on the show.
Thank you so much, Brady. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conquering Your Clownfish. If you liked what we discussed on the podcast today and want to continue the conversation, please visit us at conqueringyourclownfish.com. And please don't forget to subscribe.